Good day everyone. So yeah, this video is not really about Kokomi and Xiangling. It is actually to talk a bit about Vaporize in preparation for what's going to happen when Sumeru drops, and I do think this is kind of an important video to make. So as you guys can see on screen, there is the elemental chart, and let's just quickly focus on the top left hand corner. So you can see there that if you apply an element of pyro to the enemy and your second element is hydro, you get what we call an amplifying reaction. So in other words, the damage that you're going to do with your hydro character is going to be multiplied by 2 times. And also conversely, if the first element applied to the enemy is hydro and then pyro comes into contact afterwards, you get reverse vaporize. In other words, the damage that you will do will then be multiplied by 1.5. So this is actually what I want to talk about, because there's a lot more that's sort of going on in the background than just what this little simple chart sort of demonstrates, and obviously you just got to sort of practically see it. So you'll see me in the background just messing around with Kokomi Xiangling and whatever, but the whole point here is those values that you saw of the first element and the second element have an actual gauge sort of being applied to them. So what do I mean by that? Well, basically whenever you sort of apply an element onto an enemy in Genshin Impact, you don't just apply that element, you apply a certain amount of that element onto the enemy. They call it sort of a unit. Now, very typically, if you'd ever sort of stood like in the grass in the overworld and you use someone like Lee, you'll notice that she's got a tendency to put the grass on fire, and she can only do that once 2 units of pyro is sort of applied to the grass. So basically when you throw, let's say, a Klee bomb onto the grass, you'll notice that the grass doesn't actually catch fire, but if you do a Klee charge attack, suddenly the grass like catches fire, and this sort of applies to a lot of the elements in Genshin Impact. So basically I can apply a unit of pyro onto the enemy, and if I apply, let's say, 1 unit of pyro, that 1 unit is going to last for quite a bit on the enemy before it sort of disappears, and you can sort of see that from the elements sort of just like starting to fade on top of the enemy's like head and so on. But if I apply 2 units of pyro, well, obviously I've got now more sources that I can use to trigger reactions and all of these good things, but the downside is the more pyro you apply, the quicker that gauge is sort of going to go down. So it's almost like, you can almost think of it like if you douse someone with a bucket of water. If you throw a lot of water on them, they're going to be really wet, but a lot of that water is just going to drip down and not really sort of stick. But if you take a cup of water and you slowly pour it over someone's head, well, obviously that water will sort of like seep and they'll sort of stick onto a person for a bit longer, and that's kind of the intuition here with reactions. So basically if you apply a lot of pyro, you can perhaps get 1 or 2 reactions off of it if you apply like 2 units, but if you only apply like 1 unit, well, you'll only be able to like realistically get 1 unit off and then it'll disappear. Now this is what they call element gauge theory or elemental gauge theory, and basically that is pretty much all you need to know about it. There is like a whole sort of like, yeah, there's like a whole theory crafting section and so on, but basically certain elements can sort of take away from the gauges of other elements, and in certain cases some elements like hydro are the stronger element of the two between, let's say, hydro and pyro. That means that basically your hydro, let's say you apply hydro onto the enemy and then you apply pyro, well, you'll obviously trigger a reverse sort of vaporize. You'll get a 1.5 multiplier, but you will still have a bit of hydro left. It's a very strong element. But conversely, if let's say your enemy is afflicted by pyro, and the moment you sort of douse him with a bit of hydro, that entire pyro sort of aura that you've put onto the enemy will get like completely consumed by the hydro. So that's what we mean, like hydro being the stronger element. So why is this all important? Well, when Dendro comes out, Dendro itself is also going to act as a bit of a stronger element, and this will have very interesting implications for reactions and so on. Now, it's not the point of this video to discuss it. We'll discuss it once we can actually give you live in gameplay or like in-game footage and so on, but it is something that I just want to familiarize you guys with in case you're not familiar with it, and just to sort of keep at the back of your mind, because the way in which elements react in the game is like so interesting. This is why stuff like, for instance, taser is like so much fun. So basically, if you put down a kokomi jellyfish and so on, and you use sucrose, you can actually spread like the hydro to enemies that are like outside of the jellyfish range. But all it takes for you is to just tap one enemy with a bit of electro, like just one unit of electro, and suddenly if your sucrose swirls it, well, all the enemies have electro on it. It's just like so cool how all of these elemental reactions interact, and yeah, how certain elements can sort of be sticky. So for instance, the Hydra, as you can see in the background, and the Electro don't eat each other up. They sort of coexist in a certain sense, and that's sort of like the basis of like taser teams and so on. And that's what makes it so like fun to play with. And now there's just one last thing I need to sort of mention. Reactions like vaporize and melt are what they call amplifying reactions, because they amplify the damage that you're going to do by adding a multiplier, whereas your overload, your superconduct, electrocharge and all these others are sort of transformative reactions. In other words, they don't give you any multiplier. The damage that they do purely depends on your level and your the amount of elemental mastery that you've gotten. And I think this is where we've said in the past, characters like Kokishinobu and Yamiko that sort of have a bit of EM scaling in their kit will really benefit from like Dendro and so on with the reactions that are going to come out. Now, will this make Dendro like really OP in meta? I honestly don't know. But what I do know is that you cannot really swirl Dendro, so your Kazuha cannot shred Dendro resistance. He cannot give you a Dendro hydro damage bonus in any sort of meaningful way. And I think in a certain sense, what I've been reading so far, and we'll still confirm this, Pyro and Dendro also have like a bit of an adverse reaction if you trigger, I think it's Virgin or whatever, there's like a reaction like that. So at the end of the day, I just want to sort of echo what I said a couple of videos ago, like a month ago. I do think Dendro is going to be the start of us, of basically the game opening up beyond just the simple, oh, take X unit, apply Bennett Kazuha, therefore X unit does a lot of damage, therefore they are good or bad or whatever. I do think people are going to have to work a bit harder, especially content creators, to fully understand how Dendro works and sort of what it means, and I do think it will be a nice way of opening up the game even more so. But that's it, guys. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you think in the comments. Cheers.